Shalom. Welcome to the 7th International Drylands, Desert and Desertification Conference. I would like to thank the UNCCD, ABGU, and BGU for their invaluable support to this conference. I would also like to thank all the people behind the scenes and the screens that contributed to the success of the conference, including Dorit, Ilana, Esther, and Naama, and all the many individuals that helped. Over 2,000 individuals representing over 100 different countries that consist of approximately 95% of the population on Earth are registered to the DDD 2020. The diverse international community that is represented in this conference is a proof to the importance of the issues dealt with in the DDD. The success of the conference is attributed to and depends on each one of you. Thank you. This year's theme, Feeding the Drylands, Challenges in a Changing Environment, concerns every living organism on our planet. The sessions in the conference will deal with challenges concerning human health, food, water, and ecosystems. And I hope that we will have a significant conference in which we will listen, be heard, learn, and draw conclusions that will benefit humanity and the planet. We hope to see you all in person on the 8th DDD. Good luck to us all. I am now honored to welcome the Ambassador of Zambia to Israel and the Dean of the African Ambassadors to Israel, His Excellency Martin Mwambele, and after him, the Ambassador of Italy to Israel, His Excellency Gianluigi Benedetti.
My name is Martin Mwanambale, Ambassador of the Republic of Zambia to the State of Israel and Dean of the African Group of Ambassadors. I'm grateful for this opportunity to say a few words at the start of this 7th International Conference on Drylands, Deserts, and Desertification under the theme Feeding the Drylands, Challenges of a Changing Environment. First, I wish to commend the Ben-Gurion University of the Negev and its partners for organizing such an important event, even as we are grappling with the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. This is a demonstration of your determination to find solutions to the problems that confront humankind. It's gratifying to see practitioners, researchers, and other stakeholders come together to share knowledge on this important subject. I wish this conference success. We look forward to actionable resolutions and a strategy to confront the problems that affect humankind. Thank you very much.
Dear participants, it is a great pleasure to greet you on the occasion of another edition, unfortunately without the charm of Sde Boker and the Negev Desert, of the DDD conference. Since 1995, when the International Day Against Desertification was established, it has provided an opportunity to raise public awareness on the degradation of soils and the uncareful consumption of water resources, a phenomenon that is more than concerning. It is nothing less than a real threat. In this framework, this recurrent conference provides us with the opportunity to take stock of the damage caused by drought and to analyze in depth the causes of soil impoverishment. In Italy, according to the estimate of the National Research Institute, there are areas in which, due to climate change, the actual percentage of the organic matter contained in the soil dropped to a scary number of 2%. This is a threshold for which it is actually relevant to call these areas a real desert. The desertification is advancing not only in the south, but continues to affect more and more also regions in the north, where some areas are gradually drying up. In the absence of significant rainfall, it is clear to all that certain decisive measures should be taken to ensure the supply of water resources, so essential for some crop cycles. This is an actual challenge that deserves our full attention and an international effort, even in a period of other urgent global challenges, such as the COVID pandemic. Italy has been an avid participant in the Drylands conference, and in previous editions we have hosted large delegations which have arrived especially for this event, sometimes headed by ministers or presidents of regions. I salute you for not giving up on this highly important initiative and for presenting a particularly interesting and international forum, taking some of the most relevant and not easily answered questions in this field. I wish all of you a productive and enriching discussion, hoping to meet you in person next year.
I'm honored to welcome the Minister of Environmental Protection, Minister Gila Gamliel.
I would like to open by welcoming all participants. The world is facing three major challenges today: COVID-19, climate change, and biodiversity loss. The effects of all three are particularly felt in countries already challenged by desertification. The results of land loss as deserts spread are well known: the loss of food and water and livelihoods, whole communities being wiped out, and large-scale movements of population and migration with all the instability that brings. But my message is one of hope in these challenging times. Take Israel, for example. Around 60% of the country's land area is covered by the Negev desert. So Israel is almost entirely facing threats of desertification. Yet Israel is one of the few examples where desert areas have not increased but have been reduced, while our agriculture products more while using less resources. We have developed technologies over the years that are used both in Israel and overseas in fields such as water recycling, water management, irrigation, agriculture in arid environments, soil erosion, salinization, and climate suits building and infrastructure. I am very excited today to tell you about a new initiative of my ministry together with many important partners, Desertec. Desertec will be based in the new innovation district in Be'er Sheva, here at the Negev Desert, to promote the development of technologies that foster resilience to climate change and desertification. It will be a hub for innovations that allow for sustainable living in arid and semi-arid climates. By harnessing Israeli innovation, we really hope to leave no one behind. Our dream is for Desertec to provide tailor-made solutions together with effective training for countries suffering the effects of desertification. But we also know that we bring to the table needs to be combined with the expertise and experience of other partners for maximum effects. The historic Abraham Accords signed recently with the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain include cooperation in this area. That is why this conference is of vital importance. It brings together experts from all around the world. We exchange ideas and hear about new challenges and solutions, for there is nothing that a human spirit of innovation and cooperation cannot achieve. I wish you every success over the next few days, and thank you very much.
I welcome the director of the Blaustein Institute for Desert Research, Professor Noam Weissberg.
Good morning, good afternoon here in Israel, good evening, and somewhere good night as well, depends where you are. It is really a great pleasure for me to say a few words in this welcome session of the 7th Drylands, Desert and Desertification Conference, the DDD in short. This year the DDD general theme is Feeding the Drylands, Challenges in Changing Environment. Personally, I have been involved in previous DDD conferences in several roles as a member of the steering committee, as a session and field trip organizer, and as a lecturer. Currently, as the director of the Blaustein Institute for Desert Research that hosts and organized the DDD from its very inception, I think it was in 2008, it is a real honor for me to welcome you to this wonderful and extremely important and interesting event. This is the first time that the DDD is taking place as a web-based conference rather than in its usual location here on our beautiful Sde Boker campus of the Ben-Gurion University of the Negev, in the heart of the Israeli Negev desert. While the COVID-19 situation was developing, we kept hoping we could still hold the conference in person. And only recently we recognized that this could not happen. The relatively fast transition online has allowed around 2,000 participants for more than 100 countries, representing about 95% of the world population, to register to this DDD. This number, I believe, demonstrates the enormous importance of the topics we're dealing with in this conference, namely food challenges, water challenges, human challenges, and ecosystem challenges. These numbers demonstrate the huge importance of drylands that currently occupy more than 40% of the world terrestrial area and are home of about 2.5 billion people. These numbers demonstrate that the sustainable development of drylands everywhere in all continents and countries is a press concern for the future of humanity. We, here at the Blaustein Institute for Desert Research of BGU, are proud to lead these efforts and to be a hub for so many people that are working hard at studying and implementing new technologies to make the desert bloom, to fight desertification, to minimize and battle climate change impacts in general and in drylands in particular, and to enable food security, water availability, clean energy, and protection of our ecosystems. I would like to thank a few people: Professor Dani Chaimovich, BGU president and also a well-known expert in food security, as you will hear it shortly in his lecture. I would really like to thank Professor Shimon Rachmilevich, who did an excellent, outstanding job as the chair of this conference, the dedicated people in the organizing committee that I don't have time to say all their names, the United Nations that support us from the beginning and became an old friend of the DDD conferences, the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the American Associates of BGU, always great supporters of this conference. Without their help, we could not make it happen. And all of you from all over the world for being with us. I'm sure that this will be a very engaging conference with many compelling talks. And I hope it will also lead to new collaborations and partnerships. And finally, I hope to see you all in person at our next DDD conference here at the Sde Boker campus of BGU, hopefully next year. So have a great conference, and again, thank you all.
I'm proud, honored, and excited to have Ben-Gurion University's president as the opening speaker of the conference. Professor Chaimovich is an eminent plant science scientist, a colleague, and above all, a mensch, who was previously one of the establishers and the director of the MANA Center for Food Safety and Security at Tel Aviv University. Professor Daniel Chaimovich will open the conference with the keynote lecture on food security. Please welcome him with applause by pressing the applause icon below.
Thank you very much for the warm introduction. I'd like to, on behalf of Ben-Gurion University of the Negev, I'd like to welcome you all to this virtual conference. You know, past 6 years, we've had this on past 6 times at the university, at our Sde Boker campus. But maybe actually the fact that we have to have this conference virtually is an advantage for us this year. The fact that there are, I think, over 900 people with us right now from over 60 countries. I'm not sure that all of you would have had the opportunity or the option of coming to be with us on campus right now. So in this very important time of COVID-19, of the pandemic, but with that, we know that within a year or two, with the inoculations, the pandemic will come to an end. It is clear that the biggest problem in the world, and it will be one day after the pandemic ends, is global climate change, desertification, and all the effects that this has on our society. So I'm incredibly thankful to the organizers of this meeting, all of the speakers from around the world who are joining us, all of you, the participants, and our sponsors who really saw the importance of this meeting. And mostly, I'd like to thank the organizers of this meeting for giving me an opportunity to take a step outside of my role as president, to remove the president's hat. Actually, if I can for a second, maybe even remove the president's tie. And go back to my earlier life, not so long ago, as an academic who one of my fields of interest was food security. And I'd like to share with you over the next 20 minutes, the last report, the last project I was involved in. This was it's a report that came out of the Association of Academies and Societies of Sciences in Asia, ASA, which led a major collaborative study on food security in Asia and the Pacific. And this was took us about 2.5 years to come up with this report. So what was special, or what defined our approach? So what was different about our approach was, first of all, we had leading scientists from the academies across the region. And it's one of the largest regions, or if not the largest region in the world. And they were drawn from a wide geographic area and across different scientific disciplines. We had economists and plant biologists and agricultural experts and public health experts, nutritionists, even people involved in political science. So all these disciplines coming together to study food security in the Asia-Pacific area. We used a bottom-up analysis using a food systems approach to develop common themes to study food security. And once we wrote the report went first through peer review and then was signed off by all 34 science academies in Asia and the Pacific. So the report was both cooperative and authoritative. And what was our challenge? Our challenge was how to ensure food security in the Asia-Pacific region over the next 20 to 30 years. This massive region on our globe, massive and diverse region. But before we go into our findings, let's go into see what was the definition of food security that we adopted. As you know, many people use the word food security as a tag item, as a buzzword. And we adopted the definition from the World Food Summit, which says that food security exists when all people at all times have the physical and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food that meets the dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life. In other words, it's important to remember that food security is not a question only of calories. Food security is a question of where you're getting the calories from and how it makes you feel. In different parts of the world, we are happy eating different foods. So first, we defined our challenges, and you could probably define these with me. The first, of course, is population growth. We're quickly approaching 10 billion people in the world, more than 3 times the day I was born. And much of this growth is happening in Asia. But interestingly, the growth within Asia is variable. Countries such as India and Indonesia will experience still large growth in populations, whereas countries such as Japan and China are actually going to have negative growth. The second challenge is we have an expanding middle class throughout Asia. And why is this a challenge? Because as the middle class grows, of course, this slows down population growth. But the food desires of the middle class is different from that of a poverty class. The food needs of a middle class are different. And the middle class also becomes a very consumer-based society, which then affects how agriculture is done, which affects waste, which affects pollution, affects all the issues of food and nutritional security. So that needs to be taken into account also, the expanding middle class and the changing in food preferences. The third challenge is a challenge of urbanization. And this is a picture from the town I live in, Hod HaSharon in Israel. This is a neighborhood which until a few decades ago was full of orange orchards and strawberry fields. But now you see it's a neighborhoods within the town. The town has increased from 10,000 people to over 50,000 people. And all over the world, we see this happening, that arable land is decreasing. Arable land is decreasing even at a rate of over 100 square kilometers per year. What this means is that while today, a little bit less than 24% of the Earth's surface is arable, it's predicted that by 2050, in only 30 years, this will reduce to only 20% of the Earth's surface. The fourth challenge is the loss of yield gains. While population has been growing dramatically over the past century, today in the world, there's proportionally less hunger than at any time in human history. And the reason is that for the past 100 years, each year, the yield per acre, the yield per hectare of corn, of rice, of soybeans has gone up, such that we're producing more food on less land. But over the past decade or so, we've noticed a trend that for many crops, these gains in yield are seeming to level off, that we might be reaching some type of biological limit or biological limit that we know of right now to how much yield we can increase per plant. And whatever we're going to do, we're going to have to deal with a rapidly changing climate, whether it's through desertification or through droughts, huge periods of heat, massive rainfalls, winds. This is going to affect the way we're going to be able to grow our food. And this is not anything new. This has been obvious for decades. In this graph, we see yields of corn in the United States. And every time there was a major environmental event, yields went down, whether it be drought or whether it be flooding. And this is just going to increase in the coming years. Now, if I go back to the good news is that we've been able to feed the world rather well recently. But unfortunately, challenge number 6 is that modern agriculture is not sustainable. Wherever we look, modern agriculture has left its scars on the earth that will affect our ability to grow food in the future. Whether it be the fertilizer runoff in the Gulf of Mexico, which is leading to this large dead zone, whether it be cutting down of the Amazon for soy fields and other fields, whether it be desertification, loss of biodiversity, the overuse of pesticides, wherever we look, we can see the scars inflicted by modern agriculture. So while of course producing food and solving hunger is critical, we're going to have to find new ways of doing this. So what are the overall implications of this? First of all, the world will need to produce 70% more food by the middle of this century. But not just more food, we'll have to produce healthier foods. This is both a consumer demand and a need in society that our food become more healthy. So we're looking not only at food security, but also nutritional security. And we're going to have to do this with less land. We're going to have to do this with less water. And we're going to have to do this with fewer phosphates. We sometimes forget that phosphate fertilizers are a non-renewable resource. And whatever we do, we have to consider the impact of climate change. So what were the key findings of our report? And I won't go through the entire report in the time here, just some of the key findings. First of all, we have to deal with both under and overnutrition. These are the challenges of a modern world. There are as many people who are now considered obese, actually even more than undernourished. Food and nutrition security is much more than simple calorie provision, as I've said. And because of this, we call on all countries, actually regions, to define a healthy diet that's appropriate both regionally or locally. You know, everyone talks about, or a lot of people talk about the Mediterranean diet. We're lucky that in Israel, that if everyone would adopt the Mediterranean diet, we would all be much healthier. But the Mediterranean diet is not culturally proper for other parts in the world. So each part of the world needs to define a diet which would both provide nutritional security, health security, and is appropriate. We need to take into account food wastage. It's as important as food production, because if we reduce waste, then we don't have to produce as much food. Most importantly, whatever strategy we come up with, it must be evidence-based. Within this, we came up with 31 key recommendations, but I first want to talk about what I think is the most important one. That science and technology, and that's the purpose of this conference, must take center stage. We have to recognize and accept and publicize that science and technology is the engine of long-term change in food security. But the problem, there's a great lag. So in this graph, we see money invested in science and technology, and what's the economic return of the research benefits. But there is a decades-long lag between investment and return. This is what science is all about. The basic science research leading to the applied research, which is then finally taken over by industry. We've seen this over the past century in agriculture, whether it be in the adoption of hybrid crops, the adoption of irrigation, or even the rather rapid adoption of transgenic biotech crop technologies. So there needs a long-term investment to reap benefit. And historically, this investment has been done by governments because it's such a long-term investment. But the problem is that modern democracy, modern politics doesn't always have a long-term view. And if we look at several countries throughout Asia, I can use China first as an example. Look at what's going on here in China. Every year over the past quarter of a century, there's been an increase in investment in research and development, and this is all standardized per percentage of the GDP. Even as the GDP in China went up, they've increased spending in research and development. The same thing with South Korea. It's been amazing how South Korea has invested in research and development. In the recent decade, Thailand has started going on with that also. But if you look at other countries, the situation is not as optimistic. India, with all of its wonderful growth, has remained basically flatlined in its research and development spending as a percentage of GDP. Israel, our own country here, where we're having the conference, at the turn of the century had a massive increase. But since then, we've been flatlined. And what does that mean, actually? That means we're going backwards because there's been inflation over this time. And so if we don't, countries that don't invest in research and development today will not have the capabilities in 1 or 2 decades to meet the challenges that will face us. And this is essential from a historical perspective. You know, food security is nothing new. We can look at it both as an ancient and modern phenomenon. From where I'm speaking now, 3,500 years ago, according to the Bible, Abraham took his family and his followers out of the land of Israel, down through the desert, through Beersheba, and across into Egypt. And why did he leave? According to the Bible, I think the sentence is, and there was a great famine in the land. And so they had to leave to look for food. Even today, this continues. The march of people from the Middle East and from Africa into Europe is less of a desire for democracy than it is a desire to know that they have the financial capability to feed their children. People who have food and nutritional security do not often leave from where they live. And even in stable countries like Israel, food insecurity can lead to social unrest. The Israelis here will remember this 10 years ago, 9 years ago. This is a demonstration in the center of Tel Aviv. This is me here where the blue line is. And this demonstration, 500,000 people, was because of a 70% increase in the cost of cottage cheese. We love cottage cheese in Israel. It's part of our staple diet. And a rise in the price of cottage cheese brought 500,000 people to demonstrate, almost brought down the government, and actually caused a change at that time in the prices. So it behooves all of us in all societies, whether rich or poor, to make sure that there is food security throughout the entire country. So with all of these challenges, I have to say I'm an optimist. And the reason I'm an optimist is because of India. When I was a child, the famines in India, in Rajasthan and in Bihar, were so severe that if it wasn't for foreign aid, who knows how many tens of millions of people would have died. At that time in India, I believe there were about 400 million people in the country. If someone would have told us then in the 1960s that India of 2020 would be a net food exporter, no one would have believed it. That's not to say that there's not food and nutritional insecurity in India today, but it's less agronomic than it is economic. So technology, the adoption of technology, the adoption of green revolution technologies can allow us to provide the nutritional needs we have for the world. I'm convinced of that. So what were the bottom line messages? First of all, there needs to be public dissemination of factual science-based information regarding food and nutritional security, and in particular, the role of agricultural biotechnology in providing safe and sustainable, healthy diets. If people aren't willing to accept technology, we are often to blame for it that we haven't communicated properly. Second, we need to have cross-nation, interdisciplinary centers of research and educational excellence in Asia, the best of the best. They need to be formed now to focus on defined issues. You know, sort of like in Europe, they managed to have international research centers. We should have them also in Asia. And so for this, we need a transnational funding mechanism to establish something similar to in Europe to fund this essential research for the future of our planet and to reinvigorate agri-food research, to actually market agri-food research as high tech. And so what's the concluding quote? Increasing pressures from population growth, urbanization, land availability, resource and water availability, pollution, global climate change, and loss of biodiversity conspire to make food and nutrition security a formidable near-term challenge. Science offers solutions, but plans need to be made now and enacted boldly and decisively if catastrophe and great suffering are to be avoided. I want to go through this and put a highlight on a few words: population growth, urbanization, land availability, resource and water availability, and global climate change. Maybe that is really the challenge of this conference: how to combat desertification, but at the same time use the desert as land to provide us the nutrition that we need. It's because of this, and I want to talk a few minutes about Ben-Gurion University, about what's going on. It's because of this, I want to talk about what have we learned from 50 years of study in the desert. We've learned that what we once considered local problems are now global. This is what we're all doing here today. That real breakthroughs need multidisciplinary chutzpah. And chutzpah is a Yiddish, now Hebrew word, which defies definition, but basically means nerve. You need chutzpah to think that you can do agriculture in the middle of the desert. You need chutzpah to think that you can export tomatoes from the desert to Europe. We have extensive experience, but also translating this research to industry and in international development. And finally, there are no simple answers. These are complex issues we're working with. And so partnerships, interdisciplinary and international partnerships are essential. And considering all this, and because of this, we are now forming at Ben-Gurion University the School of Climate Change Impacts. We've spent 5 decades learning how to thrive in the desert through problem-based research. We've tackled the challenges of water scarcity and food security, developed advanced energy and cooling technologies, and studied the effects of a hot environment on human health. The urgent issues raised by rapid climate change, which you are dealing with in this conference, require informed action today. We have a responsibility, all of us do, to educate the next generation of leaders, both in research and in society, to tackle this challenge. And through our research, develop viable and implementable options to ensure a habitable future and well-being for everyone. This was actually the main conclusion of the report. So this school, the School of Science of Climate Change Impacts, will try to disseminate this around the world. We're now poised to share this experience. We have it right here in Beersheba, in Sde Boker. We have a supradisciplinary group of over 150, well, I consider, and I think you will consider also, outstanding scientists. And we want it to be a center for transdisciplinary academic teaching and research on the critical issues of climate change and sustainability. But at the same time, we have to recognize that climate change is not simply a physical problem, but rather one raising a host of societal problems. And we're going to take a transdisciplinary approach, engage throughout the school to leverage resources, to equip global leaders of today and tomorrow with the ability to apply their skills and knowledge in any area, to find real solutions to real world problems as we have been doing already. And I invite you to partner with us, because without your partnership, we're just going to be working with ourselves here in one university. We all have to work together to find these solutions for real world problems. And technologies such as Zoom enable us to share students, to share classes, to have research groups working together in a daily manner to find solutions for desertification, water purification, water usage, energy, all the things that you're going to be talking about in this conference. And in the end, we have to remind ourselves, why are we doing this? And I want to quote, I think I just drew a blank on his name, it'll come to me in a second, who said, that combating hunger is not a question of charity. It's a question of human rights. No person, no mother should ever have to go to bed worrying about where her children are going to find their next meal. This is an issue of humanity. And that's why we do what we do. And that's why you are here at this conference. Thank you very much for allowing me to present this. I'll be happy to answer any questions if that's what's allowed right now. And I'll go back to the organizers. Thank you very much.